The first thing I noticed wasn't the pain, it was the silence. For 20 years, my life has been a cacophony of shouting sous chefs, clattering pans, and the ticket printer screeching out orders like a dying bird. But lying there, staring at a ceiling tile stained with a watermark that looked suspiciously like the coast of Italy, there was nothing but the rhythmic, mechanical hiss of a ventilator next to me. I tried to lift my hand to scratch my nose, but my arm felt like it was encased in concrete. That's when the panic set in. Not the hot, adrenaline-spiked panic of a dinner rush when the risotto is burning, but a cold, slow-moving dread. I didn't know it yet, but my life as Elena Rossi, executive chef, owner of the Gilded Table, and wife to a visionary tech entrepreneur was already over. It had ended 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night. I was just the last one to find out. I was 44 years old when my brain decided to mutiny. The doctors later told my brother Marco that it was a ruptured aneurysm. They said it was a ticking time bomb, likely exacerbated by stress, high blood pressure, and the 80-hour weeks I pulled standing on concrete floors. I remembered the moment it happened. I was plating the squab, our signature dish. I remember the heat of the past, the smell of truffle oil, and then a sound like a gunshot inside my skull. Then just the floor. Waking up was less like a movie scene and more like drowning in reverse. I surfaced gasping, my throat raw from the intubation tube they must have just removed. A nurse was there instantly, a woman with kind eyes and a grip like a vice. "Easy, chef," she said. She knew who I was. "You're at mercy, General. You've been in a medically induced coma for 19 days. You're safe." Safe. That word echoed in my head, hollow and strange. I spent the first hour drifting in and out, my brain trying to reboot. But by the second hour, the fog lifted enough for the instincts to kick in. Control. I needed control. "Phone," I croaked. My voice sounded like I'd been gargling gravel. "You should rest, Mrs. Rossi," the nurse said gently. "Phone," I repeated, putting every ounce of my depleted will into that one syllable. She hesitated, then reached into the drawer of the bedside table. She handed me my iPhone. The screen was cracked, probably from the fall in the kitchen. I fumbled with it, my left hand trembling. My right hand, my knife hand, felt heavy and numb. I unlocked it with Face ID. The notifications cascaded down the screen like a waterfall. 400 missed calls. 3,000 emails. Texts from my sous chef, my suppliers, my landlord, but I ignored them all. My thumb hovered over the banking app. I had been saving for an expansion. The Gilded Table was doing well, but I wanted to buy the building next door. I had built a war chest, $185,000. It was blood money earned through missed holidays, burns up my forearms, and a marriage that felt more like a roommate arrangement. I tapped the icon, the little blue wheel spun. I expected to see a dip, maybe hospital bills. Maybe Julian had paid the restaurant rent while I was out. The screen loaded, checking $0 savings. $0 business operating, $14.52. I blinked. I wiped the screen with my thumb, thinking maybe it was a smudge. I refreshed the page. $0. The air left the room. My heart monitor started to beep faster, a frantic pip 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 that gave away my rising terror. Julian had access. We had set it up years ago for emergencies, back when I believed his talk about us being a team. Back when I believed his string of failed apps were just bad luck and not incompetence. I switched to my messages. There was a thread with Julian at the top. "No, I love you. No, thank God you're alive." No updates on my condition. Just a screenshot. It was a picture of a bank transfer confirmation. And below it, a single text message sent 4 days ago. "Consider this my severance package, Elena. The angel investors didn't get the vision, but I know you always believed in me. I'm finally launching. You're strong. You'll rebuild. You always do." He had robbed me. He didn't just take my savings. He took the payroll. He took the vendor payments. He took the rent. He had gutted the Gilded Table like a fish while I lay with a tube down my throat, hovering between life and death. Severance package. I stared at the words until they blurred. He treated our marriage, my life's work, like a corporate layoff. He justified grand larceny as a launch strategy. The nurse rushed over, alarmed by the spiking heart monitor. "Mrs. Rossi, Elena, you need to calm down. Your blood pressure is spiking. I'm going to call the doctor." "No," I whispered. I closed my eyes. I pictured Julian. I pictured his soft hands that had never held a hot pan or scrubbed a floor. I pictured the way he would sip the expensive wine I bought, complaining about the mouthfeel while I rubbed my swollen ankles under the table. He thought I was broken. He thought he had timed this perfectly, stripping the carcass while the animal was dead. But he had made a miscalculation, a fatal one. I wasn't dead, and I wasn't just a wife. I was a chef. I knew how to handle heat. I knew how to sharpen knives, and I knew exactly how to butcher a pig. I opened my eyes. The tears that had threatened to fall were gone, evaporated by a rage so white-hot it felt like clarity. I looked at the nurse. "Don't call the doctor," I said, my voice suddenly steady, the gravel gone. "Call my brother, tell him to bring his laptop." I looked back at the phone, at Julian's cruel, self-righteous text. I didn't type a response, not yet. Instead, I opened my photos, scrolled back 3 years, and found a picture I took of a napkin from the night I paid off my first business loan. It had a single red stamp on it, paid in full. I hit send. Julian thought he had closed the deal. He had no idea he just opened a tab he couldn't afford. They say you should never go grocery shopping when you're hungry. You make bad choices, you buy the junk, the sugar, the things that rot your teeth but feel good for 5 seconds. I realized, staring at the fluorescent light fixture above my hospital bed, that the same rule applies to love. You should never pick a husband when you're starving for validation. 10 years ago, I was starving. I was a 34-year-old line cook with burn scars up my forearms and a bank account that hovered in the double digits. I was desperate for someone to look at me and see something other than a workhorse. So when Julian walked in with his cashmere sweater, his manicured fingernails, and his talk of disrupting markets, I didn't see a parasite. I saw a garnish. I saw the beautiful, delicate thing that would make my messy, chaotic life look plated. I didn't know then that garnishes are inedible, and sometimes they're poisonous. Waiting for my brother Marco to arrive gave me too much time to think. The hospital room was quiet, a stark contrast to the soundtrack of my life. For the last decade, silence was a luxury I couldn't afford. I closed my eyes and let the morphine haze drag me back. Not to the bank account, I couldn't look at that zero again without flatlining the monitor, but to him. I met Julian when I was still running a food truck, slinging gourmet arancini to the lunch crowd in the financial district. He was pre-revenue, which I learned later is tech speak for unemployed with an ego. He bought a saffron riser, took one bite, and told me the texture was transcendent. He wasn't like the guys I worked with in the kitchen. He didn't smell like old fryer grease and cigarettes. He smelled like sandalwood and potential. When we got married, we made a deal, an unspoken contract. I was the hands, he was the head. I was the labor, he was the vision. "You're the artist, Elle," he'd say, pouring himself a glass of Barolo that cost more than my weekly tips. "I'm just the infrastructure. I'm here to make sure you have a castle to come home to." And for a while, I believed him. I worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week. I built the gilded table from a lease in a rundown warehouse into a reservation-only hotspot. I missed my niece's baptism. I missed my father's retirement party. I missed 10 years of sleep. And Julian, he managed our life. He managed it by buying gadgets we didn't need. Smart fridges that ordered milk I never drank. A $4,000 espresso machine he used twice. He spent his days in coffee shops ideating his next venture: an app for dog walkers, a platform for artisanal ice, a crypto wallet for toddlers. None of them launched. None of them made a dime. But he was always there when I stumbled home at 2 a.m., smelling like garlic and exhaustion. He'd be on the couch, laptop open, blue light illuminating his face. "Rough night?" he'd ask, not looking up. "Dishwasher quit." Sous chef walked out. "Had to jump on the line," I'd mumble, collapsing onto the rug because the sofa was Italian leather and he didn't want my grease on it. "You work too hard, babe," he'd say. "That's why you need me. To handle the big picture. One day my ship will come in and you can hang up the apron." The resentment didn't hit me all at once. It was a slow reduction, simmering over low heat for years. It boiled over on New Year's Eve. 3 weeks ago, it was the biggest night of the year. We were fully booked, 120 covers. The prix menu was priced at $250 a head. The pressure was atmospheric, and we were short-staffed. My lead sauté chef had the flu. I was working the pass, shouting orders, checking plates, wiping sweat out of my eyes with my shoulder because my hands were covered in duck fat. My head was pounding, a rhythmic thumping behind my left eye that I had been ignoring for weeks. Just stress, I told myself, just dehydration. Then I saw him. Julian was at table 4, the VIP booth. He was entertaining 3 angel investors he'd been courting for his latest obsession, a luxury lifestyle app called Vantage. He looked immaculate. Crisp white shirt, unbuttoned just so, laughing, gesturing with a wine glass. He caught my eye through the open kitchen window. I was drowning. Tickets were piling up. My vision was blurring at the edges. I needed help. I needed someone to run to the walk-in for more butter. I needed a partner. Julian didn't ask if I was okay. He signaled the waiter. The waiter came to the pass, looking terrified. "Chef, table 4 wants to know if you can send out a round of the vintage Brunello comps. He says it's to seal the deal." That was the moment. The thumping behind my eye turned into a scream. He's pitching, I thought. I am dying on my feet to pay the mortgage, to pay for his suit, to pay for the food he's eating, and he wants a free bottle of wine to impress strangers. "Tell him," I started to say, but the words wouldn't form. My tongue felt like it was made of lead. The kitchen tilted sideways. The silver gleam of the heat lamps stretched into long, blinding streaks of light. The noise, the clatter, the shouting dropped into a deep, underwater hum. I reached for the counter to steady myself, but my hand missed. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me wasn't my sous chef rushing forward. It wasn't the floor. It was Julian at table 4, throwing his head back in laughter, clinking glasses with a man in a gray suit. He never even looked up. The door to my hospital room hissed open, snapping me out of the memory. Marco walked in. My brother looks like a tank that learned how to type. He's 6'4", shaved head, beard like steel wool. He works in cybersecurity, the kind where you don't have a LinkedIn profile and you get paid in wire transfers from shell companies. He didn't say hello, he didn't ask how I was feeling. He just walked to the visitor chair, spun it around, and sat down. He placed a battered black laptop on the swinging table tray. "I got your message," Marco said, his voice a low rumble. "I ran the numbers. It's bad, isn't it?" I asked. He took the expansion fund, the $185,000. Marco looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he looked scared. "Elena," he said softly, "he didn't just take the savings. I checked the restaurant's credit lines, the business loans, the vendor accounts." I felt the cold dread return. "What did he do, Marco?" Marco turned the laptop screen toward me. "He didn't just drain the liquid cash," Marco said. "He maxed out everything. He leveraged the bistro. He took out emergency loans in your name while you were in the coma. He didn't just steal the fruit, El. He salted the earth. You don't have $0. You're 300,000 in the hole. There is a specific sound a plastic hospital wristband makes when you cut it off with kitchen shears. It's a dull snip, followed by the feeling of air hitting skin that hasn't breathed in 3 weeks. The doctors told me I was insane. They used words like postoperative liability and hemorrhage risk. They waved a clipboard in my face titled "Discharge Against Medical Advice." It was essentially a waiver saying that if I dropped dead on the sidewalk, Mercy General wasn't responsible for the cleanup. I signed it. My signature was shaky, a jagged scar of ink on the paper, but I signed it. Because they didn't understand. They thought the danger was inside my head, the aneurysm, the blood pressure, the clots. They didn't realize the real hemorrhage was happening outside. My life was bleeding out, dollar by dollar, transaction by transaction. And you can't cauterize a wound like that from a hospital bed. My brother Marco lives in a converted industrial loft in the Navy Yard. It doesn't look like a home. It looks like the inside of a hard drive. No photos on the walls, just server racks humming in a climate-controlled glass box. The windows are blacked out. The air smells like ozone and burnt coffee. I sat on his uncomfortable leather sofa, still wearing sweatpants I'd borrowed from the lost and found bin at the hospital because Julian had never brought me a change of clothes. "Drink," Marco said, handing me a glass of water. "No ice, room temperature. And take the pills. If you stroke out on my rug, I'm not calling the ambulance." He was joking, I think. "Show me the anatomy," I said, ignoring the pills. "Dissect it," Marco sighed and typed a command into his terminal. The 3 massive monitors on his desk flickered to life. "Okay, El, here's the autopsy." He brought up a timeline. It was terrifyingly precise. Day 1, Marco pointed to a timestamp. January 1st, 2 a.m., you're in the ambulance. Julian logs into the restaurant's payroll system using your admin override. He changes the direct deposit routing number. I felt sick. He stole the staff's wages, the dishwasher's rent money. He rerouted it to a holding shell company called Aurora Concepts, Marco corrected. Day 3, you're in the ICU. Doctors are drilling a hole in your skull to relieve pressure. Julian walks into First National Bank. He triggers the incapacitated spouse clause on your joint business assets. He had the power of attorney you signed 5 years ago for the liquor license renewal. That was limited, I argued, my voice rising. That was specific to the state liquor board, not the copy he showed the bank manager, Marco said grimly. He forged an amendment, digital manipulation, high quality. He granted himself full fiduciary control during the period of medical distress. He used your coma as a skeleton key, Alina. Being almost dead was the most profitable thing you ever did for him. I stared at the screen. The dates lined up perfectly. Every time I had a surgery, every time my fever spiked, Julian made a transfer. January 5th, $40,000 line of credit drawn down. January 10th, $185,000 expansion fund liquidated. January 15th, a second mortgage taken out on the restaurant building. He leveraged the bricks, I whispered. He mortgaged the kitchen. He sold the future, Marco said. He took out high-interest, short-term bridging loans, the kind you get from guys who break kneecaps or, in Julian's case, predatory venture debt firms. He pitched the Gilded Table not as a restaurant, but as collateral for his tech launch. I stood up, pacing the room despite the dizziness. I had spent 10 years building that credit rating. I treated my vendors like family. I paid on time every time, and in 3 weeks he had turned my reputation into a toxic asset. Where is the money, Marco? I asked, leaning over his shoulder. $300,000 doesn't just vanish. Is it in crypto? Is it offshore? Some of it is parked in a shell account in the Caymans, Marco said, highlighting a block of wire transfers. But a lot of it, he's spending it fast. Spending it on what? App development, servers? Marco hesitated. He clicked a few keys and a new window popped up. It was a credit card statement for the Aurora Concepts corporate card, the one funded by my sweat and blood. I don't think he's coding, Marco said softly. I looked at the line items. They weren't server costs. They weren't developer salaries. The Ritz-Carlton Laguna Niguel, $4,200. Balenciaga South Coast Plaza, $3,800. Private jet charter Teterboro to Van Nuys, $12,500. He's in California, I realized. He's playing the big shot. He's acting like he already made it. He's burning your money to fake success, Marco said. He's trying to manifest a reality where he's a billionaire by spending like one until the money runs out. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was the same feeling I got when I smelled meat turning bad. The rot. He's not alone, I said. It wasn't a question. Marco went silent. The hum of the servers seemed to get louder. Marco, I warned. I found a recurring payment, Marco admitted. Every week, $2,000. Labeled brand consulting. Who is the consultant? Marco pulled up a profile. It wasn't a LinkedIn page, it was Instagram, the screen filled with carefully curated beige. Photos of avocado toast, sunsets, and perfectly disorganized bedsheets. The handle was at Sienna Sky Life. Sienna, Marco read, 24 years old, lifestyle curator, muse. He clicked on a photo posted 3 days ago. It was a picture of a girl with impossibly shiny hair holding a glass of champagne on a balcony overlooking the ocean. The caption read, "So grateful for visionary men who make dreams reality. Number launch mode, number power couple." I leaned in closer. The champagne glass, I knew that glass. It was etched crystal. It was my crystal from my wedding registry. And on the table next to her, visible only if you zoomed in, was a man's hand resting on a leather notebook. On the pinky finger was a signet ring, gold with a small onyx chip. I bought that ring for Julian for our 10th anniversary. He didn't just take my money, I said, my voice dead calm. He took my life. And he gave it to her? Marco looked at me, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the tears. Find out where that photo was taken, I said, and get me the login for the Aurora Concepts bank account. Alina, that's hacking. That's a federal crime. I looked at my brother. No, Marco, I paid for that account. I paid for the champagne. I paid for the ring. I'm just auditing the books. There is a specific type of nausea reserved for scrolling through the Instagram feed of the woman living the life you paid for. It's not jealousy. Jealousy is hot, it's passionate. This was clinical. It was like looking at a receipt for a meal you didn't eat but were charged double for. I sat in the blue light of Marco's server room, scrolling through at Sienna Sky Life, watching my retirement fund turn into pixels. There, in a post from 3 weeks ago, a pair of Christian Louboutin heels. Caption: stepping into my power, number boss babe, cost $895. Source: my line cooks unpaid overtime. There 2 weeks ago. A sushi boat in Nabu, Malibu. Caption: fueling the vision, number raw ambition. Cost $400. Source: the leaky roof repair I deferred at the restaurant. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was metabolizing my labor. Every like she got was bought with a blister on my hand. Stop scrolling, Marco said, his fingers flying across his mechanical keyboard. You're shopping for pain. Let's look at the logistics. I need to know the exchange rate, I muttered, not looking up. I need to know how many hours of sweating over a degreaser it takes to buy a consulting trip to Chelum. Marco spun his chair around. We have the bank records from Aurora Concepts. We have her feed. Let's overlay them. He pulled up a split screen on the main monitor. On the left, the bank ledger Julian had been using to siphon my business capital. On the right, Sienna's journey. It was a masterclass in fraud. Look at this, Marco pointed. October 14th, you had that plumbing emergency at the bistro, remember? The grease trap backed up. You were there until 4 a.m. dealing with the plumber. I remembered. I remembered crying in the alleyway because the smell wouldn't come out of my hair and I was terrified we'd miss the health inspection. Julian had told me he was at a hackathon in Seattle. Marco highlighted a transaction. October 14th, Southwest Airlines, 2 tickets, Portland to Las Vegas. October 15th, the Cosmopolitan Hotel, penthouse suite. On the right side of the screen, Marco pulled up a photo from Sienna's archive. She was in a bathrobe holding a stack of poker chips standing on a balcony. Caption: what happens in Vegas starts the empire. Number disruptors. He wasn't at a hackathon, I said, my voice hollow. He was playing high roller with the money I made unclogging a grease trap. It gets worse, Marco said. He sounded apologetic, which for Marco was terrifying. The recurring payments, the $2,000 a week. Rent, better or worse, it's payroll, I blinked. He put her on payroll, not officially. He categorized it as brand strategy retainer, but look at the dates. It started 6 months ago, right when you secured the loan for the expansion. I pieced it together. The expansion loan, the money I fought tooth and nail for, the money intended to buy the building next door so we could finally open a bakery, that was their seed money. Julian hadn't just stolen from me when I got sick. He had been siphoning the tank for half a year. My aneurysm just gave him the opportunity to steal the car. He's building a brand, I realized, staring at Sienna's glossy smile. He's trying to launch Vantage, this lifestyle app, and she's the prototype, she's the product. She thinks he's a genius, Marco observed, reading a caption where she thanked her silent partner for believing in her. She has no idea the money is coming from a bistro in Portland. She thinks he's a tech CEO, I said. She doesn't know he's a parasite attached to a host he thinks is dying. Marco typed a new command. I found the lease. He pulled up a document. It was a residential lease agreement for a loft in the Pearl District. The monthly rent was $4,500. The Pearl, I scoffed. Of course, exposed brick. Industrial chic. Look at the signatory, Marco said. I leaned in. The tenant was listed as Aurora Concepts, LLC, but the guarantor, the personal guarantor required by the landlord, it wasn't Julian. That's my signature, I whispered. Marco nodded grimly. He forged your signature as the guarantor. If he stops paying rent on his mistress's love nest, the landlord comes after you. He literally tied your credit score to his affair. That was the moment the sadness finally died. It shriveled up and blew away, leaving only the cold, hard steel of intent. He had made me the co-signer of my own humiliation. He thinks he's safe, I said, standing up. The dizziness was gone. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. He thinks I'm lying in a hospital bed, drooling, waiting for him to pull the plug or pity me. He thinks you're a closed loop, Marco agreed. He's in burn rate mode. He's spending fast to get Vantage off the ground before the money runs out. I looked at the bank balance on the screen. Remaining funds in Aurora Concepts, $42,000. He's running out of runway, I noted. He's been bleeding cash at a rate of 20 grand a week. He has 2 weeks left before he hits the wall. And when he hits the wall, he'll panic, I said. He needs a liquidity event. He needs more cash to keep Sienna impressed and the launch on track. I walked over to the whiteboard where Marco kept his server schematics. I picked up a red marker. He wants to be a big shot, I said, uncapping the marker. He wants to play with the big boys. Let's show him what happens when the market crashes. Marco, I said, turning back to him, can you freeze the accounts? I can do better, Marco said, a dark smile touching his lips. I can trigger a fraud alert, but not on the theft. That takes too long to investigate. Then what? I can trigger an alert on the identity. He used your credentials to open the accounts. If you report your identity as compromised to the credit bureaus right now, they lock everything. Every card, every transfer, every ATM withdrawal associated with your social security number. Do it, I said. It will lock you out too, Elle. You won't be able to use a credit card. You'll be a ghost. I looked at the picture of Sienna holding my champagne glass. I'm already a ghost, Marco. Now let's see how the visionary handles a declined card in front of his investors. Marco hit enter. Power doesn't sound like a gavel banging or a gun firing. In the 21st century, power sounds like a single, soft click of a mechanical keyboard. At 7:42 p.m., Marco hit the enter key. There was no explosion. No siren, just a small dialog box on the screen that said, Fraud alert active. All credit lines suspended. Identity verification required. In that microsecond, Julian Rossi ceased to be a wealthy tech visionary. He became a man with a wallet full of useless plastic and a pocket full of lies. I took a sip of lukewarm water and watched the screen, waiting. It's a strange feeling holding the remote control to someone else's life. For 10 years, he had held the remote to mine, pausing my dreams, muting my needs. Now I had just pressed stop. How long until he notices? I asked, my eyes glued to the monitors. Depends on what he's doing, Marco said, leaning back in his chair. If he's just sitting in the hotel room, maybe morning, but if I know Julian, he's celebrating, I finished. He thinks the severance package text was the end of it. He thinks I'm still a vegetable in Mercy General. Marco pointed to the right screen. Sienna had gone live. The notification popped up, at Sienna Sky Life is live. Launch Party VIBES, we clicked it. The video was shaky, loud, and bathed in purple strobe light. They were at a club, one of those places in West Hollywood where a bottle of vodka costs as much as a used Honda. The bass was thumping, distorting the audio. Hey guys, Sienna yelled into the phone, her face flushed with excitement and probably the vintage Dom Perignon I paid for. We are celebrating tonight. Vantage is officially in beta. And my silent partner, she swung the camera around to Julian, is making it rain. Julian looked drunk on arrogance. He was wearing a new suit, velvet maybe, hard to tell in the strobe light. He held up a black card, waving it at the camera like a magic wand. To the vision, he shouted, his words slightly slurred. To the vision, Sienna squealed. They were ordering another round, not just a round, a parade. A train of waitresses approached their table carrying bottles with sparklers attached to them. The Ace of Spades champagne train, that alone was 5 grand. Here we go, Marco whispered. On the screen, the lead waitress set the bottles down. The music swelled. Julian handed the waitress the black card with a flourish. She took it and walked off-screen to the portable terminal. We watched. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Sienna was busy reading comments on the stream. OMG yes, total power couple goals, thanks, user 77. Then the waitress came back. She wasn't smiling anymore. She leaned down to Julian's ear. He laughed, shook his head, and waved his hand dismissively. Try it again, his body language said, it's a chip error. She walked away again, came back. This time a manager was with her. The manager wasn't leaning down, he was standing tall, arms crossed. He held the black card between 2 fingers like it was a dirty tissue. Sienna's camera was still rolling, but she had noticed the shift. The smile faltered. 1 sec guys, just dealing with, the venue is being weird. Julian stood up. We couldn't hear the words over the bass, but we saw the gestures, the angry pointing, the do you know who I am stance. He reached into his wallet and pulled out another card, my business Amex. The manager took it, swiped it, shook his head immediately, then a third card, the personal Visa, declined. The sparklers on the champagne bottles were burning down, turning from festive fireworks into sad, sputtering ash. The waitresses started picking up the bottles to take them away. Sienna panicked. She ended the stream abruptly. The screen went black. Got him, Marco said softly. 2 minutes later, my phone, which had been silent for days, lit up. Julian, babe, call me, emergency. I didn't answer. Julian, Alina, pick up. The bank blocked the cards. It's a glitch. I'm stuck at a client dinner. Client dinner, I scoffed. He means the bottle service he just tried to stiff. Julian, seriously, Alina, call the bank. Verify the charges. I can't pay the bill. This is embarrassing. I watched the texts roll in. The transition from annoyance to command to begging was rapid. Julian, why aren't you answering? I know the nurse reads these to you. Tell her to call the bank. Julian, Elena. Julian, they're threatening to call the cops. Fix this. Fix this, I read aloud. He still thinks I'm his fixer. He thinks I'm his admin assistant. He doesn't know you're the one who broke it, Marco said. He thinks it's incompetence, not malice. Let's change that, I said. I picked up the phone. I didn't call him. I opened the banking app, the one he thought he controlled. Since the freeze was identity-based, I couldn't move money either, but I could send a notification. I requested a statement of account be emailed to the primary address on file, his email, but I added a memo line to the request, a customized note that would appear in the subject line. Memo, severance package declined. The reaction was instantaneous. My phone rang. Julian, it rang again. Julian, then a text, but this one was different. Julian, you're awake. He wasn't dumb. He saw the memo. He realized the cards weren't just frozen, they were weaponized. Julian, you think this is funny? I'm in the middle of a deal. You're destroying the company. Unfreeze the cards now, or I swear to God, Alina. I looked at Marco. He's scared. He should be, Marco said. But he's not done. He's desperate. A desperate man doesn't just give up, he doubles down. Marco's other monitor beeped. A proximity alert. Someone just tried to access the restaurant's security cameras remotely, Marco said. It's Julian's login. He wants to see if I'm there, I realized. He's checking to see if I'm physically at the bistro. He won't see you there, Marco said, but he knows you're not at the hospital. I just got an alert from Mercy General Systems. Someone called the nurse's station asking for your room number. He knows you've checked out. Good, I said, leaning back. Now he knows he's not fighting a ghost, he's fighting his wife. There's a saying in the kitchen, if you want to catch a rat, you don't chase it. You plate the cheese and wait. Julian was a rat, and right now he was a starving one. With his credit cards frozen and his investor dinner ending in humiliation, he was in a corner. But rats in corners don't surrender, they look for a hole. Marco and I spent the night building that hole. It wasn't a physical trap, it was a digital mirage. We built a website for a venture capital firm called Helios Partners. We gave it a sleek logo, a Meet the Team page populated with AI-generated faces of serious-looking men in fleeces, and a mission statement about disruptive lifestyle tech. It looked exactly like the kind of firm that would give a guy like Julian $5 million. It looked like salvation. The email is ready, Marco said. It was 3 a.m. We were running on espresso and adrenaline. Read it to me, I said. Marco cleared his throat. Dear Julian, we've been tracking Vantage's beta metrics. Impressive. We know you're currently in a quiet period, but Helios is looking to deploy capital before Cone close. We'd like to offer a term sheet for a seed round. $2.5 million valuation. However, our due diligence window is closing in 48 hours. He'll bite, I said. He's desperate. He needs to pay the hotel bill in LA before they call the cops. Here's the hook, Marco continued. Standard procedure requires a good faith escrow deposit of $15,000 to cover expedited legal diligence. This is fully refundable upon closing. 15 grand, I mused. Just enough to hurt. Just enough that he can't put it on a credit card because they're all frozen. Exactly, Marco said. If he wants this deal, if he wants the imaginary millions, he has to find $15,000 of liquid cash now. And since we froze his visible assets, he'll have to tap into the invisible ones. The offshore account, I realized. The stash he's been hiding. If he wires money to Helios Partners, Marco smiled, he reveals the source account. We catch him moving hidden assets. That's wire fraud, money laundering, and violation of a marital asset freeze all in one click. Send it. Marco hit send. We waited. The silence in the loft was heavy. I imagined Julian in his hotel room, hungover, staring at his phone, sweating through his velvet suit. He was probably terrified. The hotel management would be knocking soon asking for a valid card. Sienna was probably asking why they couldn't go shopping. 20 minutes later, ding. He opened it, Marco said. He's reading it. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He's hesitating, I said. He knows it's risky? He's greedy, Marco corrected. Greed overrides fear, always. Then a reply appeared. From Julian Rossi, CEO at VantageApp.io to partners at heliosvc.com. Subject, Ray. Term sheet, glad to connect. The timing is tight, but we can make it work. I can wire the diligence fee immediately. Please send routing instructions. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He bought it. Marco typed back the routing number for a monitored account we had set up. Now came the hard part, the transfer. If Julian was smart, he would walk away. He would confess to the hotel, call his parents, beg for a loan. But Julian wasn't smart, he was proud. He couldn't admit failure to Sienna, he couldn't admit he was broke. He needed the lie to continue more than he needed air. On the screen, the banking portal for our fake VC firm sat empty. Balance, $0. Come on, I whispered. Plate the cheese. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. I thought about the nights I slept on flour sacks. I thought about the burns. I thought about the severance package text. Suddenly, the screen blinked. Incoming wire transfer, $15,000 status, pending Origin Bank, Banco de Sal, Cayman Islands. Account name. JR Holdings Limited. Gotcha, Marco shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. JR Holdings, I said, reading the screen. He named his shell company after himself. The narcissist? We have the account number, Marco said, typing furiously. We have the SWIFT code, and now, thanks to international banking treaties on money laundering, we have probable cause. Can we seize it? Better, Marco said. We can flag it. I'm sending this data to the forensic accountant your lawyer recommended. And since he just used a foreign account to pay a U.S. entity for a fraudulent business deal. Federal, I finished. It's wire fraud? My phone buzzed. It was Julian again. Julian, Alina, I'm flying back tonight. We need to talk. I'm closing a huge deal. Everything is going to be fine. I'll pay you back whatever you think I owe. He thought he had won. He thought the Helios deal was real. He thought he was about to get $2.5 million, pay me off, and ride into the sunset with Sienna. He had no idea he had just wired his confession directly to my brother. He's coming back, I told Marco, flying back tonight. He's probably coming to get his passport, Marco said. If he thinks he's getting funded, he might try to bolt before the divorce lawyers get involved. He's not going to get his passport, I said, standing up. I felt strong. For the first time since the aneurysm, I felt like the chef de cuisine. I was running the kitchen again. Where are you going? Marco asked. I'm going to the restaurant, I said. He'll come there first. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'm confused. I want to be there when he realizes the only thing waiting for him is the bill. Alina, that's dangerous. No, Marco, I checked my reflection in the dark window. Dangerous is eating raw chicken, this. This is just service. A commercial kitchen at 4 a.m. is a graveyard of good intentions. It smells of stale degreaser, cold stainless steel, and the faint, lingering ghost of burnt garlic. I sat on a stool in the dark next to the walk-in fridge, holding the only thing Julian Rossi wanted more than my money. His passport. I heard the back door rattle. Then the sound of a key copied illicitly, no doubt scratching against the lock. He was clumsy. Panic makes your hands shake just like caffeine or guilt. The door swung open, letting in a slice of rainy Portland street lamp light. Julian stumbled in. He looked like a man who had been wearing the same velvet suit for 3 days. His hair was matted, his eyes wild. He didn't see me in the shadows. He went straight for the floor safe under the prep table. He fell to his knees, spinning the dial. Left 30, right 10, left 4, nothing happened. He spun it again faster, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Left 30, right 10, left 4. I changed the combination, Julian, I said. He jumped, spinning around so fast he slipped on the mats, crashing his hip against the butcher block. He squinted into the dark. Alina, his voice was a cracked whisper. I stepped into the light of the exit sign. I was wearing my chef's whites. Not the hospital gown, not the sweatpants, my armor. You look terrible, I observed. I need the passport, he stammered, scrambling up. I have a meeting, a closing, Helios Partners, they're funding the seed round. I need to fly to their HQ in Geneva. Geneva, I raised an eyebrow. Funny, their website is hosted on a server in Marco's living room. Julian froze. What? Helios, I said, stepping closer. In Greek mythology, he sees everything, but in this case, Helios is just a shell company I set up to catch a rat. He blinked, his brain misfiring. No, I wired them the diligence fee. I sent the money. I know, I said. And by wiring $15,000 from Banco de Sol to a U.S. entity, you just gave the FBI the routing number for your money laundering operation. The color drained from his face, leaving him the color of uncooked dough. You set me up, he whispered. I'm your husband. No, I corrected. You're a bad investment and I'm liquidating. I held up the passport. You want this? You want to run? Go ahead. I tossed it onto the stainless steel prep table. It landed with a soft thwack. He looked at the passport, then at me, then at the door. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He grabbed the passport and ran. He ran out the back door into the rain towards his rented car. He was going to the airport. He thought if he could just get on a plane, any plane, he could outrun the wire transfer. I pulled out my phone. Marco, he's rabbiting, heading to PDX. International Terminal. We're already there, Marco said, and so are the feds. An hour later, I stood behind the glass partition of the International Departures Terminal. Marco stood next to me, arms crossed, watching the security checkpoint like a hawk. There, Marco pointed. Julian was in the priority lane. Of course he was. Even as a fugitive, he couldn't bring himself to stand and coach. He was sweating, shifting from foot to foot, checking his watch. He kept glancing over his shoulder. He handed his passport to the TSA agent. The agent took it, scanned it. A red light must have flashed on the screen. The agent frowned, typed something, and picked up a phone. Julian saw it. He tried to reach for the passport back. I'm in a hurry. If there's an issue, I can just… Then they swarmed. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. No guns drawn, just 4 men in dark windbreakers moving with synchronized efficiency. 2 from the side, 2 from behind. Julian Rossi? One of them asked. We couldn't hear the words through the glass, but we saw Julian slump. His shoulders collapsed. The arrogance, the vision, the persona, it all evaporated. He tried to argue. He pointed at his phone. He probably tried to tell them about the angel investors. The agent spun him around. The handcuffs clicked. People in line started filming. Phones went up. Julian Rossi, the man who wanted to be famous, was finally getting his wish. He was going viral. As they led him away, he looked up. He scanned the observation deck. For a second, our eyes locked through the glass. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and couldn't understand why his parents wouldn't just fix it. He mouthed something. I'm sorry. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt the same way I felt after a double shift on Valentine's Day. Exhausted. Empty. Clean. Let's go, I said to Marco. I have prep to do. We walked back to the car in silence. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and black. It's over, Marco said, unlocking the doors. He's in federal custody. The forensic accountants will claw back the money from the offshore account. You'll get most of it back? Not all of it, I said. I can't get the time back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, assuming it was the lawyer. But it buzzed again and again. A call. I pulled it out. The number was blocked, I answered. This is Chef Rossi. You beach. The voice was shrill, panicked, and young. He told me you were dead, Sienna screamed into the phone. The FBI is at my apartment. They're seizing my laptop. They said I'm a co-conspirator. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I listened to her sob. The muse, the lifestyle curator. Now just another accessory to a crime she didn't understand. Sienna, I said, my voice cutting through her panic like a paring knife. Shut up and listen. There is a specific technique for tempering chocolate. You have to melt it down, destroy its crystalline structure with heat, and then cool it rapidly while agitating it. If you do it wrong, it breaks. If you do it right, it snaps. It becomes glossy, hard, and resilient. Sienna was not tempered, she was melting. I'm going to jail, She sobbed into the phone, her voice thick with the kind of terror that only hits you when the Instagram filter falls off and reality crashes in. They said I received stolen funds, the rent, the trips. They said I'm a beneficiary of fraud. I stood in the rain outside the airport terminal, listening to the woman who had slept in my bed while I was in a coma. I should have hated her. I should have hung up and let the feds eat her alive. But hatred is expensive, and I was done paying Julian's bills. Sienna, I said, my voice steady, stop crying, tears don't work on forensic accountants. Only data does. What do I do? She choked out. You turn state's evidence, I said. You tell them everything. You tell them about the business trips where he met with nobody. You give them the passwords to his laptop if you have them. You hand over every gift, every bag, every receipt. But I love him, she whispered, the words sounding small and stupid even to her own ears. You love a version of him that I paid for, I corrected. That man doesn't exist. The real Julian is sitting in a holding cell right now trying to figure out if he can blame this whole thing on you. Don't let him use you as a shield. Be the witness. I hung up. I never spoke to her again. I heard later through Marco that she took the advice. She flipped on him so fast the prosecutors got whiplash. She avoided jail time, traded for community service and a permanent record. She deleted her social media. The muse went dark. 3 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom. It was quieter than my kitchen, sterile and cold. Julian sat at the defendant's table. The velvet suits were gone, replaced by a drab gray button-down that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds. He looked like a man who had been completely deleveraged. He took the plea deal, 5 years probation, a permanent felony record for wire fraud, and restitution, full restitution. $312,000 to be paid back to me, garnished from every paycheck he would ever earn for the rest of his miserable life. When the judge finalized the sentencing, Julian's public defender stood up. Your Honor, the lawyer said, shifting uncomfortably. Mr. Rossi would like to address the victim. He would like to offer an apology. The judge looked at me. Miss Rossi, do you wish to hear the defendant's statement? The courtroom went silent. I looked at Julian. He was looking at me with those puppy dog eyes, the ones he used to use when he wanted me to invest in a new crypto scheme or forgive him for forgetting my birthday. He wanted absolution. He wanted me to nod, to cry, to give him one last emotional transaction. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. No, Your Honor, I said. I don't send back food that's spoiled. I just throw it out. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look back. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind me with a final, satisfying thud. The reopening of the gilded table happened 2 weeks later. It wasn't the expansion Julian had promised. I didn't buy the building next door. I didn't add a bakery. I had to sell the expansion site to pay off the bridge loans he had taken out in my name. But I kept the kitchen. The night of the reopening, the air was thick with the smell of rosemary, searing scallops, and controlled chaos. The ticket printer chattered its rhythmic song. CHCHCHZZZT. Order in, my new sous chef yelled. 2 squab, 1 risotto, 1 severance. I smiled. I had updated the menu. The signature dessert was now a dark chocolate tart, bitter and rich, topped with edible gold leaf and a single drop of sea salt. I called it the severance. It cost $25. Every time someone ordered it, I put the money into a new fund, a legal defense grant for women rebuilding their businesses after financial abuse. I stood at the pass, wiping the rim of a plate. My arm ached, a phantom pain from the weeks of atrophy, but my hand was steady. I looked out into the dining room. It was full. The noise was a dull roar of conversation and clinking silverware. I saw a couple at table 4, Julian's old table. The man was talking loudly, gesturing with his wine glass, ignoring the woman across from him. I saw her look down at her plate, her face tired, her eyes distant. I signaled the waiter. Table 4, I said. Send the lady a glass of the vintage Brunello on the house. And the gentleman chef, full price, I said, and make sure the bill comes to him. The waiter nodded and walked away. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sense of garlic, wine, and heat. The aneurysm had tried to kill me. My husband had tried to sell me for parts. They thought I was just the labor. They thought I was just the hands that chopped the vegetables and scrubbed the floors. They forgot that the chef is the one who holds the knife. I looked at the ticket printer. A new order came through. I picked up my knife. The steel felt cool and heavy and perfect. Yes, chef, I whispered to myself. I was back on the line, and this time I was cooking for myself.